to be doing what we call a future talk. It's basically sort of a roundtable discussion in which we kind of bat around ideas. Certainly you're going to be the focal point, and we want to really hear from you on whatever subjects kind of you get sparked by in the course of conversation.
No problem.
And then we'll just kind of run with it and see how it goes.
Something that I would like to say is that I think we get more emails, and have done over the 3 years that we've been going, asking us to interview you and wondering if there's some weird reason why we haven't.
Never got together. But here we are. It's all synchronistic in the end.
Absolutely.
In the end.
And so we're here in Sedona, and you're here, and it was great that we were able to connect with you.
Great.
So where we want to go with this is we have whistleblowers, and I'm curious, have you got your own sort of secret sources that have been giving you information through the years?
No. What happened to me is I had an extraordinary experience, or series of experiences, in the early 1990s. I was a television presenter and a national spokesman of the British Green Party. And suddenly I felt over 1989 that there was a presence in the room whenever I was alone. And it became more and more tangible as 1989 unfolded. It was bizarre, really, because the Green Party in Britain had their biggest electoral year in 1989 at European elections. And I was going through all this while, whenever I was in a room alone, like a hotel room or something, there was this presence, you know. And eventually, it got the Green Party powerful towards the end of '89, that I was sitting on the side of a bed in a hotel called the Kensington Hilton in London, just down from the BBC headquarters. And I said to this apparently empty room, look, if there's something there, would you please contact me, because you'll drive me up the wall. About 2 weeks later, it must have been, I'm with my son. He was a little boy then. He's a singer-songwriter now, in his mid-20s.
6'4". Right.
Yeah, this is Gaz and Gareth. And we were playing football, and we were going to go down into the town to get some lunch. I live on a seaside resort in a place called the Isle of Wight in England. And as we got down towards this Greasy Joe Cafe, some railway worker stopped me and started talking about football, because I was on the television talking about sport and stuff. And then after this conversation was finished, I saw that Gareth wasn't there. I knew where it would be. It'd be in the news shop just down next to us. So I walked in, and he was reading the steam train books, because we like steam trains, certainly like me. And I said to him, come on, Gaz, we'll go and get some lunch. And as I turned, my feet wouldn't move. Now, this is a guy who's not been into any of this stuff. He's a television presenter and national spokesman of the Green Party, a journalist, basically. And my feet wouldn't move. And I heard, well, it's really a voice, but a very strong thought form passed through my mind, which didn't seem attached to me. Why would I think it? And it said, go and look at the books on the far side. So I went over, and in among the romantic novels was this book with a woman's face on the front. And I picked it up because it was so different to the rest. Turned it over, saw the word psychic. So I read this book in 24 hours, and I wrote to her. I went to see her. And what I told her was, I had arthritis, which I have, and maybe her hands-on healing would help. I told her not the real reason I went, which was, would she pick up what the heck this presence is I've been feeling for nearly a year? Well, actually, for a year by then. And went to the first couple of times, and it was saw her 4 times, and she did the hands-on healing, and we had a chat about other dimensions and stuff. All made sense to me, because I'd always rejected religion and always rejected the scientific view of reality. I just hadn't focused on what's okay, so what's the alternative? And then the third time I went, I'm lying there on this medical type bench thing, and I felt like a spider's web on my face, which really took me aback, because I'd read in her book that when other dimensions or whatever, spirits or whatever you want to use, are trying to lock into you, you sometimes feel like a spider's web on your face. Well, funnily enough, I never had before, and I never have since, but at that moment, seriously powerful, real, tangible. So I'm going, oh my goodness me, what's going on? And she's kind of doing this by my left knee. And I never said a word to her. And then suddenly, she launches her head back and goes, my God, I've got to close my eyes for this one. This is powerful. And she sees this this figure in her mind, and she says, this figure's, or whatever she called it, is asking me to pass information to you. And take into account, you know, I'm a television presenter, presenting the sport and the news at the time. And suddenly she starts saying that this entity, or this projection of consciousness, was saying that I was going to go out on a world stage eventually and reveal great secrets. That there was a shadow across the world that had to be lifted, that there was going to be a spiritual revolution in my lifetime because of a vibrational change. That's why the first book I wrote was called Truth Vibrations, after that vibrational change. And that one line was, one man cannot change the world, but one man can communicate the message that will change the world. I would write 5 books in 3 years. And I'm thinking, I know nothing about this stuff. 5 books in 3 years, you must be having a laugh. You know, and this is all new to me. I wrote 5 books in 3 years to the month, and I didn't realize I'd done it until I realized it was 5 and then went back. It was 5 books to the month of 3 years from that time. And I went back another time and the next time, and there was some more. So I left and waited. Something felt right about it, even though my mind's going, what? Within weeks, the BBC had decided they weren't going to renew my contract, even though I was the youngest one in their department I was in by a mile, presenter. And it would seem that I would have had a lifetime, working lifetime future there. When I look back at that thought, my emotional chakra, you know, starts vibrating wildly. The thought of being in the media all my life, oh my God, when I look back, nightmare. Anyway, so now I'm out of work, but I feel I have to go with this. Unfortunately, I've always lived below my income because I have a very, you know, I'm minimalist me. I'd rather have the money to go to India than a big house with a mortgage, you know. Anyway, so I had enough money to keep me going for a year. And then it all started. This synchronistic, almost daily, this daily journey through a maze. And when I started out, it was a thick maze. I had no idea what this was all about. Just felt I had to go with it. I didn't even know why I had to go with it. I just got to go with this. And what's happened is, it's like some force has been opening and closing doors. So I go down this road in a maze and not this one. And so coming round to, you know, answering your question directly, I just follow and have followed now for nearly 20 years, this pulsing, this urging, this knowing that passes through me. I edit my life on the basis of that. Will you go here? Don't feel to. Will you go here? Yeah, I feel, I'll be there. And what has happened as a result of just doing that is I've walked into people, experiences, information, books, documents, which has taken me, when I look back, on a very specific journey. I've described it before as like, you're trying to put a jigsaw puzzle together, and some force is handing you the pieces.
We feel the exact same way.
We've had the same experience.
Almost in the right order that you can encompass them in the picture most easily. Mm-hmm. And so, first of all, in the early years of the 90s and through to about 1996, all the synchronicity was about the 5 sense level of this conspiracy. Banking scams, families connecting, same people behind this and behind that and behind that, who's behind the drug networks and all that stuff, banking families and engineered wars, what was really behind the Second World War, the First World War, what's this, and then what's this this network that is the guiding force of this conspiracy, all that stuff. And then from about 96, when I came to America to talk about this for the first time, And lots of people turned up. I talked to 8 people in Chicago, I remember that. It was that was what you might call an expeditionary 3 months, because I was talking to myself most of the time. But I was picking up information as I passed around. And what started then, from 96 onwards, was the next stage of this, which is these families that I'd learned so much about in the years before, were actually connected to some non-human race or entities, for which they were basically fronting up an agenda within this 5-sense reality. That's when I went into the whole reptilian stuff. And of course, the synchronicity of my life and my journey, personal journey, and my communication of information are fundamentally connected, because part of my massive part of my life is, as I've been learning more and more, you know, my personal journey has been clearing out my own body computer programming, so that you know, I can access higher and higher levels of consciousness. Of course, everyone's got the opportunity to do that, and many people are doing it now. So I've had great challenges in my life at the same time as doing the information to break this up. And break these programs up, and one of the biggest ones happened in 1991, when I started talking about what was happening to me. And of course, I was a well-known television presenter in Britain, so there was monumental ridicule of a kind that, you know, few people can actually have experienced. I mean, I would walk down the street and be laughed at by most of the people in the street for like 2-3 years. A comedian only had to say my name, no joke necessary, get a laugh.
But can we go back to that? Because I'd love to get, you know, to sort of drill down and find out how did you actually get into the reptilian situation?
Well, yeah, what I was just going to say, the reason I bring this up is about the synchronicity of my life. Is because from 96, when I started going to the reptilian stuff, because I'd been through that mass ridicule in the early 1990s, it had cleared me out of the key thing that most people live in, the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. Therefore, to me, coming out from the late 90s about the reptilian stuff was not a problem. Because the level of ridicule could not be greater than what is before.
But why did you have ridicule before? Because the only ridicule I knew was about the reptilian.
Oh no! I mean, I'll tell you another story that leads into that. Towards the end of 1991. I had this overwhelming feeling, again, the urge, the impulse, to go to Peru. And I had no idea why, I just had to go to Peru. So I get on a plane to Peru, not knowing why I'm going there. And I land in Lima Airport, and from the moment I landed, amazing synchronistic things happened. But eventually, I had this Peruvian guide chap that was taking me around. And funnily enough, the first time I met that guy was in Cuzco, in the old Inca region. And I went round to his house, because we were going off traveling around Peru from that day. And he's lying on his back and asleep. And I walked in, because the door was open. And he looked up at me and he said, not hello, but do you have any dreams last night? What? I said, well, actually, I did. I said, I had a real big, clear, technicolor dream that one of these 2 front teeth fell out. I can't remember which one. And he said, is your father or grandfather still alive? I said, well, my father is, yeah. I said, why? He said, well, that's usually symbolic of your father or your grandfather dying. I thought, well, this guy's going to be a bunch of laughs for the next 3 weeks. And
wow.
When I next got a call out of Peru, my father had died back in England.
Oh, my God.
That's unbelievable. Anyway, I go around with this guy, and where it all leads, which kind of fundamentally leads to the reason behind the ridicule, was he eventually put us in a hotel called the Siustani in Puno. It's kind of southern Peru, not far from Lake Titicaca. And the Siustani Hotel was named after an Inca ruin site about an hour and a half's drive away. So there's pictures of this place all over the hotel, the ruins. And I said to the guide, I want to go there. So we go out, and I think he did a deal, get some money out of me, because I go out in like a little tourist bus with windows on the side, with a tourist bus driver and the guide and me, nobody else. We go out to this place, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And basically, when you looked around, it was encircled by mountains, in the distance, mind. And I go there. The only people there are a couple of children with llamas for tourist photographs, but they were no tourists. So I walk around for about an hour, and it's very nice. It's on a hill, lagoon on three sides. And I go back to the car, and it was nice, but it didn't match the urge I had to go there. So I get in the van thing, and we start to drive away. And I'm looking out the window, daydreaming, and I see this mound to my right, but must be no more than 3 minutes down the road. And as I look at the mound, all I can hear in my head is, come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me. What? Because I'm really new to this stuff. I mean, what's going on with my life? So I said to the guy, can you stop the van, because the bus thing, I'm going up the mound. So I went up the mound. I couldn't see it from the road, but when I got to the top, there was a circle of standing stones, about waist high. These stones were obviously been there a very, very long time. So I walk into the middle of this circle, and I'm looking across to see Ustani and across to the distant mountains, and it's a piercing hot Peruvian day. No clouds, not a cloud in the sky, very much like this one today. And I walk to the center of this circle, and suddenly my feet go again, like they did in the news shot, but only seriously more powerful. They're like magnets pulling my feet to the ground. And I think, oh crikey, I recognize that, here we go. And then I felt like a drill going in the top of my head and through my body, through my feet into the ground, and then another one coming the other way. And then my arms go out at 45 degrees like that. I never made any decision to do it. And of course, you hold your arms out there for, a minute. It starts to ache, well, my shoulders do anyway. It was the best part of an hour. It must be 45 minutes to an hour, my arms were like that. And when it was over, my shoulders were agony, but when it was going on, nothing. And what then started to happen is this energy coming through me, this is February 1991, got more and more powerful. My body started to shake with it. And I had two very powerful thought forms that passed through my head, just like in the news shop. The first one said, they'll be talking about this 100 years from now. And I'm thinking, talking about what? And the other one was, it will be over when you feel the rain. I've just described what the weather was like. It will be over when you feel the rain. I mean, you're having a laugh, mate. So what happened then for the next 45 minutes, because time disappeared, there was no time, I worked it out later, was that this energy just kept coming through me. And I kept going in and out of, if you like, awareness, consciousness, like driving a car, and you go, crikey, where did the last 2 miles go? And one of these times when I came back to kind of awareness, I noticed that over the distant mountains there was a light grey mist. And I kind of, as I watched it, it got darker and darker very quickly. And I realized it was pouring with rain over the distant mountains. And over the next little while, however long it was, I watched this storm come out of the mountains. And people, whether people talk about a weather front, well, this was a straight line. The cloud was a straight line. I've described it many times as like drawing the curtains across the sky. And this thing's coming towards me. And as it got closer, the sun's gone, it's been covered. And all the clouds are billowing, and I'm seeing faces in the clouds. It didn't make any sense to me, but I saw faces in the clouds. And then it's a wall of rain. I'm watching it coming towards me. And by this time, I'm hanging on, with this thing coming through, this energy coming through me. And eventually it hits me. Torrential rain. And everything stopped. And that's when I staggered forward, and my shoulders were agony and all the rest of it. And many other things happened. But when I came back to England after that, as I said earlier, my book was published in the early part of 1991, which is, a matter of a very short time after this experience. And when I look back now, it was like, if you've got a dam and it's holding water back, well, the water is calm, right? Because that's its natural state in that situation, if you like. But when the dam bursts, before a new balance is found after the dam bursts, all hell breaks loose in the water, right, as it's trying to go from one state to another.
Yep.
When I look back, what happened to me on that mound, it was like the waters of my mind bursting. And for 3 months, I didn't know what planet I was on, right? In the middle of this, my book came out. And I went on the biggest chat show, live chat show in Britain at the time. It's called The Wogan Show. In a complete bloody daze about what was happening to me. And it had all been in the national papers that basically I'd gone crazy. And I was sitting in this chair in the chat show, and the audience were laughing within a minute, 2 minutes. And they basically laughed for, I think I must have been on about 16, 17 minutes. And from that moment on, because I was talking about what was happening to me, except I didn't understand what was happening to me. And what that did was trigger the most extraordinary levels of ridicule. And it cleared me out of that fear of what other people think. But I learned so much about human behavior. I remember, because what you're supposed to do when you face that scale of ridicule is run and hide, right?
And it's one of the means that's used to control us all.
Yeah, so what I did is I went on a university speaking tour, and in front of all these students who had not come to listen, they'd come to laugh, right?
My understanding is that what you had is a Kundalini experience. Do you relate to it like that, or do you call it something else?
I don't care.
But have you investigated, or has anyone talked to you about that?
No, I mean, I've talked to people about a Kundalini experience, and maybe it was. See, what I do, I can only talk for myself, is what is. You know, one of the things that was said to me by the psychic, or through the psychic in 1990, when all this started for me, was they're saying you will face enormous opposition, but they will always be there to protect you. Now, I don't know who they are. I've hardly even thought about who they are, because when I leave this genetic spacesuit, I will know who they are. All I do is I go with my intuition. And what happened to me in 1991 with the Great Ridicule was, as life so often does, it gave me my greatest gift, brilliantly disguised as my worst nightmare, because that's what it was at the time, in the experiencing of it. So what actually happened to me is something transformed my sense of perception. And that's good enough for me. I don't really have to know the detail of what happened, but Kundalini experience, it could well have been, yeah.
And in the meantime, it's got something to do with tempering the steel.
Say again?
Tempering the steel.
Tempering the steel, yeah. Because as I keep coming back to, my personal journey and what I'm doing in terms of communicating information are absolutely at one. I was going to say, what happened to me when I went out on that university speaking tour. I was at a university in Nottingham, and there were 1,000 people there. I would say 950 had come to laugh. And I walked out on the stage, and it was literally the best part of 15 minutes before I could speak, because it was just abuse, ridicule, laughter, plastic beer glasses thrown at the stage. And I just stood there and waited for it to die down, because it had to eventually. And when it did, I said, you think I'm mentally ill, don't you? And you know what it's like. Whoa, yeah. And I said, so what does that say about you? Because you've actually paid to come here to ridicule someone you believe is mentally ill. I tell you what, you could hear a pin drop. And you could hear a pin drop for the rest of the night. And it's to do what I've done in terms of talking about some really bizarre things, And, you know, my name is still only has to be mentioned in a national newspaper in Britain, and it's like complete ridicule, whatever I'm saying.
It's turned around a bit.
A little bit, but not very much. I mean, I stood for election in a parliamentary by-election was it July last year, July 2008, not to get elected. I knew I wouldn't get any votes. I didn't want any votes. I mean, I must be the first parliamentary candidate ever to put out a leaflet to everyone in the constituency saying, I don't want your votes, just your brief attention. Goodness me, I didn't want to get involved in that. But again, it was a great experience and I learned a lot from it. But the media coverage was, I did a media presentation for the national press, which was about, I don't know, 50 minutes, PowerPoint pictures and stuff, in which I talked about the 5 sense level of it, because anything else, I mean, that blew their bloody minds. Anything else, reptilians, I think, crikey. And what they did is they just went away and just abused me and abused it and ridiculed me. And ironically, the one that did the most abuse, one of the things I said was coming, actually about 6 weeks later, was actually the front page story in his own newspaper. I mean, it's bizarre. These people have total cognitive dissonance, so that they can't put these two things together. So it's still there, but it doesn't matter, you know. And you know, we're in a situation where, thanks to the internet, we can bypass these sad people that work with their concrete minds in the mainstream media.
And you don't have to reach everybody, just enough people. It's a 100th monkey thing.
Yeah, I tell you what I feel more and more, you know. I mean, look, I can feel it. When I speak, anyone speaks, it's a vibrational communication. There's silence between you and me. There's silence when you speak to me until my brain's decoded it. What it is, it's vibrational communication. And I feel very strongly that it's not just the people that hear this information. It's the fact that this information's circulating. If you do an interview for a radio station, 100,000 people might listen to it, but that broadcast frequency, carrying that information, is passing through the ether, if you like, and is there to be potentially picked up by people who don't even listen to the radio interview, and it touches them on a vibrational level. And you know,
I think that's right. You're talking about the butterfly effect, in essence.
Yeah,
you know, multiplied. And that's actually a very good way to put it. That it actually, you know, on a subliminal level, because we exist on so many different levels.
Exactly.
That it's like waves. It's actually, it's hitting them. And, you know, there's a line that I've been quoting lately that says, you know, we learn by osmosis just as much as by, you know, word. It actually permeates just by osmosis.
Yeah.
Into our skin, into our brain.
Exactly.
We're receivers.
Exactly. We're receiver transmitters, that's what we are. But people think that the only form of communication is voice to ear. I'll tell you a funny story. In 2003, I was in the rainforest of Brazil, and I took this ayahuasca psychoactive drug. It's the only time I've ever taken a psychoactive drug. Glad I did, though. It was fantastic. I mean, a lot of people have bad experience, but this female voice talked to me as loud as mine is now for 5 hours about how reality, physical reality, is an illusion. Absolutely riveting stuff. Very, very funny. I mean, my feet were in the air a couple of times. It was so funny what was coming out. And one of the things that, as the voice was telling me things, I saw pictures of obviously being projected. And there was one where I walked out on a stage, and there was an audience. I just saw the front of the audience here. And this voice said, you only speak words to keep the mind happy, basically to keep the left brain happy. And as this voice was saying to me this, I saw two women in the front row of this scene that had been projected to me. And I'd walked out in the front of the stage, and I just stood there and just said nothing, silence. And after a while, this one woman goes to nudges the other one like that and goes, basically, what's he doing? And the voice, so funny when it was said, because it came out of nowhere. The voice said, you only speak because if you did not, the audience would be asking, when the fuck is he going to start? And that actually carries a profound kind of understanding, because the real communication between all of us is unspoken.
Absolutely.
And this is very good news, and this is what I would impress upon people. The more you speak your truth, even if people are not listening, you're changing or offering a vibrational field which other people can tune into. When I look at the speed at which people are awakening, it's not just because of information on the internet. It's not just because of information in my books or someone else's books. There's something massive going on vibrationally, which fits totally with what I got through that psychic in 1990, which was there is a spiritual revolution coming and it's taking the form of a vibrational change. I can see it. In 1990, no evidence. Now, I mean, please, you can see it. I had people come up to me in LA when I spoke there recently, saying I was absolutely a part of the system until 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I read one of your books, and suddenly I'm just totally different. Now, it's not just because they read one of my books. If you start tuning into this vibrational change, then bang, things can happen real quick. And I personally find it such a good thing that from my experience, I went through all that nightmare experience in the early 1990s when I started to awake, not knowing what the hell was happening. Because now you can explain to people that if you have an energetic construct here, which was you believing everything was real and the system was serving you and this is the cutting edge of human evolution and all this nonsense, that vibrational field is vibrating your state of being out, and it will draw to you people, places, ways of life, experiences, etc., locations which fit your inner self, because the outer self is a projection of the inner self. So when you start to transform, this is what happened to me, but I mean it happens to everybody, to another state of being, which then draws to you a very different group of people, places, locations, ways of life, etc. There is a transition between the two. It doesn't go, one gone, here you go. This one has to break down as this one emerges. It's a process of one losing power over your reality, another one gaining power. It can happen very quickly, but it's not like instant.
That's actually a great metaphor for what's going in the macrocosm.
Exactly.
On the planet.
Exactly.
And in the United States in particular, but certainly England, all over. I mean, what we can see it here. I mean, what's happening here with the economic, downturn, and with people losing their houses, their shells, if you will, change their lives.
I couldn't agree more.
And the more you resist, I think, the more destruction is going to happen. The less you resist, the quicker, the destructive phase is over and you can actually start climbing back up.
Exactly.
In your case, you were quite extraordinary in the sense that you had this radical change in your life. Almost, you went from, black to white. There was almost no downtime for you, it sounds like, although you said for 3 months.
3 months was the big
on.
downturn.
But that's extraordinarily quick, especially in the 90s. Today, I think this is happening to people, and they are going through a quicker transition. And in some ways, there's also reason for that, because you and people like you have made it easier for those that are following now to go through the changes.
I hope so.
Breaking through a veil.
I hope so. I mean, I get such satisfaction when people say that they were helped in understanding what was going on. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I talk about this a lot now, because between that, the old self, and all that it projects in what we call the physical experience, and the new self, which projects something else, there is apparent chaos. Relationships break down, you lose your job, you can lose your house, and all this stuff. And if you live that as a physical, I am a human body experience, then it's very, very challenging. If you see, look, this is where I want to go, and you realize that this is the transition to get there, then you can encompass the unpleasant experiences as just that, an experience, which you're going through to get to somewhere. And quite right, the collective, there's so many levels of this, you know. It's like when people say to me sometimes, you know, well, tell me what's going on. I say, well, first of all, I'm not the guru, but if you want to know what I think is going on, my question is, what level of what's going on do you want to talk about? Because there's so many ways to observe the same thing. So on one level, these Illuminati bloodlines have crashed the global economic system because they want to have that as a problem to which they can offer a solution, which is a fiercely Orwellian, fascist, centralized economic system. But on another level, I would suggest, well beyond their level of comprehension, because they're stuck in their own box, otherwise they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. We are witnessing the transition from the prison society to the paradise society, if you like, or the freedom society, and to go from the system we've had, which is based on control and imposition, to the system that we're heading towards, which is what this vibrational change is all about. This has got to go, right. And it's now going. And if people, and it's easy to say this, it's easy to say these apparently trite things when you know, you got a knock on your door saying you're leaving your house today. Right. But if we can hold this level of seeing it, it makes it easier. We're going through this process where it's all breaking down. And if we can encompass it as what it is, which is a collective experience to get to where we'd like to go, a world of freedom, a world of kindness, a world of love, a world of freedom to express your uniqueness rather than be imprisoned in your tiny version and false identity of what you are told you are, then it's much easier than if you seek to cling to the wreckage of the dying system,
right,
and hold it together.
In some ways, you were something of a pioneer, where you had to go it alone.
I imagine that you must have much more support now from everywhere, just in the way that Kerry is describing, than you did when you really felt that you were alone going down the rack.
Yeah, it's funny though, Jim, because I mean, there's so many things I'd like to talk about that you've just brought up, because I think it's very, very important. I wouldn't say I'm a loner, but my connection has always been to that which is driving me and opening doors and pushing me in this direction, and I just follow that. So although I was alone in so many ways when it all happened, I still had that connection. And I still have that connection now, and people are very kind and very supportive. But I still basically just operate in my own little bubble and just go my own way. I don't deal with organizations, I don't connect with other researchers or anything like that. I just follow this impulse. But it is easier because there's more people that are open to what you're saying. But you know, what you just brought up is very, very important. And you know, for me, if not the greatest human disease of all, because everything comes out of it, I guess, is insecurity. Ironically, it was at the height of mass national ridicule that I found my security. Because there's that line in that song, I think it was in the 60s, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose.
Absolutely.
And you have to look inside of your security if you're not going to get it from anywhere else outside.
Yeah, I mean, you look at my situation in regard to that line from that song in the early 90s, early mid-90s. I was being ridiculed by a nation. So I had nothing left to lose. And that's when I found freedom. The freedom to break out of the prisons of fearing what other people think. And basically, I was, laugh, but this is me. You know, I saw a great car sticker. I remember a great car sticker in California I saw, would be in California. And it said, you laugh at me because I'm different, I laugh at you because you're all the same. And I don't laugh at people because they're all the same, but it is ironic when this herd mentality is kind of focusing on one person, as it was in Britain at that time. And you look at them and you think, you're laughing at me? My God. And so this economic thing that's going, and I've been describing it recently and as like a controlled demolition of a building. You see the charges go off, and then there's a bizarre split second before the building goes, and then it collapses. Well, in the economic terms of this crash, we are in that bizarre split second now. I've been describing the economic situation we're in recently as like a controlled demolition, where you see the charges go off and you know there's a problem, but then there's a bizarre split second before the building actually crashes. And I would say that we are in and getting very, very closer to the edge of, by the day, that bizarre split second. We've seen nothing yet. I mean, this is a crash that no one alive today will have seen. It can be compared with the 1930s, but because of the way the world is, and there's more people, and the nature of home ownership and all the rest of it, I think it's going to be bigger.
Fewer people with gardens and independent means of doing anything at all. We're much more interconnected.
That's the idea. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely. And so we now face this very situation you're talking about, where we need to reevaluate and it would have been a good idea to do it anyway, our symbols of success.
Right.
Now, because insecurity is rampant in people, and society, both individually, collectively, and on the level of governments and media and all the rest of it, are constantly getting people to feel insecure. Most people do not get their sense of who they are from in here. They get it from what they think is out there, so it's in their heads.
Absolutely.
And therefore, if you are going to attract to you the recognition you want that you're an okay person to feed your insecurity, you have to succeed out there on the basis of the symbols of success that out there recognizes as success. And of course, through the media and the indoctrination from cradle to grave, it's more money, bigger house, bigger car, fame, all this stuff, titles and all this business.
He who dies with the most toys wins.
Yeah, so what you've got is the insecurity itself is to kind of feed some acknowledgement that to lessen its insecurity, it's chasing these symbols of success that society has decided is successful. And we forget other symbols of success. Am I happy? Am I fulfilled? Do I live in a society, a kind, loving society that I'd like to live in? And all this goes by the board, because the other thing about needing to succeed on this manufactured basis to feed this is that you then have to compete with all the other people that are trying to succeed in the same way to feed their insecurity.
Right.
And that creates this dog-eat-dog, top of the greasy pole society, where everyone's walking over everyone else. Well, not everyone, but vast numbers of people are walking over everyone else, so that they're the ones on the top of the pile that get their insecurity fed most profoundly with the symbols of success. And this is why this insecurity is why you find some of the most insecure people you'll ever meet in places like Hollywood and in the entertainment industry, because their insecurity is such, and they're not all like this, some very secure people who just play music and like to act, but there's a lot of insecure people because they need that extra adulation to feed their insecurity. And so if we can move our point of observation from I am this body that I see in the mirror in the morning, I am David Icke, I am Charlie Smith, Ethel Jones, whatever, to I am consciousness having an experience, then your values of what is successful change, because your point of observation of everything changes. And it's the mind working through the body that deals in status and symbols of success that are how high is your pile of trinkets. Whereas consciousness, it doesn't deal in trinkets. It knows they're illusory. And of course, when you deal in trinkets like that, it's the trinkets controlling you. You're not controlling the trinkets.
Of course.
And so, for me, the whole foundation, both of coming through this crash to something much better as a result of it, and the whole transformation in general, is moving out of mind and into what I call consciousness, which is that beyond this virtual reality game, beyond this biological computer we call the body. And you can start to see the difference, because mind